You're listening to Nocturnal Nightmares. While the world sleeps peacefully, we open the door to what lies beneath. The stories that surface in silence, the fears that rise in the dark. These are not dreams, they are reminders. Stay with us. And don't close your eyes just yet. The moment Elara sank into the velveteen embrace of the train seat, her gaze snagged on him. Beyond the vibrating pain, a figure kept pace, mirroring the carriage's hurtling velocity. His eyes fixed on hers as if the glass were mere air. Dim lights hummed overhead in the near-deserted car. The rhythmic percussion of wheels on steel, the only sound filling the pregnant silence. A knot tightened low in her belly. No one belonged out there, flanking a train at this speed, a phantom clinging to the periphery. How could flesh and bone possibly shadow them across the void? Her palms, suddenly slick, left damp prints on the denim of her thighs. Leaning closer, Elara scanned the rushing darkness outside for a phantom platform. A maintenance walkway, anything. Only the deep indigo blur of night answered, against which the shape, running, floating, remained starkly defined. He was clad in garments from another time, the fabric possessing a weight, a drape suggesting heavy wool, perhaps a coat plucked from a forgotten century. Upon his chest rested an emblem, a medallion of some sort, its form unfamiliar, twisted. It wasn't a crest she recognized, evoking only a disquieting sense of wrongness. Her breath hitched, her heart hammered a frantic tattoo against her ribs. For long moments, she remained frozen, a statue locked in a staring contest with the impossible. No flicker of confusion softened his gaze. It held only the unnerving clarity of expectation, as if awaiting her next move. A sudden, violent rattle of the carriage jolted her. Her eyes darted towards the car's front. Two slumped figures, heads bowed in sleep or feigned oblivion, utterly oblivious. Back to the window. He persisted. The train devoured the track, yet his silhouette neither diminished nor wavered, a fixed point against the fleeting landscape. His unwavering stare felt like a spotlight, pinning her, stripping away any refuge. Tension coiled in her shoulders, her throat constricting, dry as dust. Decision sparked through the fear. This proximity, this direct line of sight, was unbearable. Slinging her backpack over one shoulder, Elara rose and navigated the aisle, seeking refuge several rows forward. Sinking into the new seat, she expelled a ragged breath. A furtive glance confirmed the other passengers remained inert, lost to their own worlds. An overhead bulb flickered, casting erratic shadows, unnoticed. With forced resolve, she turned her head towards the window beside her new position. At first, only the streaking tapestry of night, then, inevitably, him. Materialized anew outside this window, the strange sigil gleaming dully on his chest, his gaze unwavering. A fresh wave of cold red washed over her. Her hands trembled violently. She pressed her palms flat against the worn upholstery, seeking an anchor in the mundane texture, a brief grounding against the surge of impossibility. She blinked hard, praying for tired eyes, for hallucination. But the apparition held firm. The same archaic attire, the same impassive countenance. He didn't blink, just watched. Her legs, unsteady stilts carried her upright once more. She retreated towards the car's rearmost section, abandoning any pretense of stealth, driven solely by the urge to escape that relentless gaze. The moment she settled into the back row, a low vibration hummed through the seat. The train clattered over a joint in the tracks. A dull thud echoed from somewhere above, and then, inexorably, her eyes drifted to the window beside her. He was there, still there, waiting. It broke something within her. Nausea churned. Scrambling up, Ilara stumbled towards the connecting door at the car's end. The cold kiss of the metal handle against her palm did little to quell the rising panic. Through the door's grimy window, she saw him gliding alongside, a spectral outrider against the fleeting sodium glare of unseen station lights. The next stop, she had to get off. Wherever it led, whatever desolate platform awaited, it had to be better than this rolling prison, this constant, unnerving surveillance. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her shirt clinging damply to her back. She pushed through into the connecting passage and entered the next carriage, hoping desperately for more people. A conductor. Anyone. Empty. Rows of dark blue seats, worn and aged, stretched before her under lights that pulsed with a slow, maddening rhythm. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally on the metal floor. Sinking into a seat near the center, Ilara fought to regulate her breathing, straining her ears for any human sound beyond the train's metallic heartbeat. Silence. After a minute that stretched into an eon, she risked a glance outside. He was there, perfectly aligned. Waiting, jaw clenched, she leaned towards the glass, compelled to see more clearly. He seemed scarcely a foot away, gliding with an eerie lack of visible propulsion. His eyes locked onto hers, and a glacial chill traced its way up her spine. The insignia on his chest resolved slightly, an engraved plate etched with intricate lines and shapes that defied comprehension. Recoiling, Ilara resolved to find the conductor. She rose, her legs stiff, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the seat backs for balance. Towards the front of the car she walked, each step deliberate. Sliding open the door to the next carriage, she ignored the sudden rush of wind from the exterior connection, the metal walkway rattling precariously beneath her feet. This car held a sparse scattering of souls. 3, perhaps 4 individuals, isolated, hunched, some with hats pulled low. Summoning a shred of courage, she approached a tall man in a brown jacket, tapping his shoulder. He turned, eyes bleary with sleep or indifference. Clearing her throat, Ilara asked, her voice thin, if he'd seen anything unusual outside the windows. A frown, a shake of the head, a mumbled request to be left undisturbed as he shifted pointedly away. She tried another passenger, a woman who merely waved a dismissive hand without opening her eyes. Her pulse hammered against her eardrums. Panic prickled beneath her skin. Hurrying now towards the front, searching for authority, she found only another empty seat near the door and collapsed into it, breath ragged. Minutes later, a change in rhythm. The train began to decelerate. The screech of brakes, a palpable lurch. A station loomed, lights painting streaks across the windows. The station sign, a frustrating blur, but a platform was visible, starkly empty beneath the lamps. The plan solidified. Exit, summon a ride, vanish. The instant the train shuddered to a halt, Ilara was on her feet, knees trembling, but resolve firm. The doors hissed open. A few figures disembarked. She surged forward, reaching the threshold just as the door slid shut with pneumatic finality. She slammed the button. Nothing. Yanked at the seam. Immovable. Locked. Then the train lurched forward again. Her heart felt like it might explode. Pressing her palm flat against the cold glass, she watched the platform recede, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. A shaky sigh escaped her lips as she stumbled back to her seat. Confusion fogged her brain. Why hadn't the door opened? She was right there. A faint metallic scraping from outside drew her gaze. Him, gliding alongside, impossibly close. Ilara squeezed her eyes shut, a desperate plea for reality to reassert itself, then opened them. He remained drifting ethereal. Her throat tightened, breath catching high in her chest. A profound weakness seeped into her limbs. Calm down, she commanded herself silently. Find someone in charge. She navigated towards the front of the car again, locating a small door marked Crew Only. She knocked. Silence. Knocked again harder. Still nothing. The handle turned uselessly in her grip. Locked. The overhead speaker crackled, emitting only a burst of static before falling silent once more. Trapped. The train plunged deeper into the night. Her phone remained stubbornly devoid of signal bars. Turning, she checked the window. He was there. The sigil on his chest seemed to emit a faint, intrinsic luminescence as they passed beneath the occasional trackside light. A shiver traced the length of her spine. Retreating to her seat, she sat rigidly, hands gripping her knees. The few remaining passengers seemed utterly encased in their own realities. One rustled a newspaper. Another stared blankly at a dark phone screen. None acknowledged the impossible presence just beyond the glass. The tension knotted her shoulders into painful lumps. A dull ache began to throb behind her eyes. At the next station, the ritual repeated. She sprang up, rushing the door as the train slowed. Others alighted without issue. But for Ilara, the door remained sealed, refusing even a crack. She pounded on the glass, a frantic prisoner, but the departing figures on the platform didn't spare her a glance before melting into the station's gloom. The train pulled away. Staggering back, heat flushed her face. Back to her seat, breath coming in ragged bursts, hands shaking uncontrollably. Something, or someone, was binding her to this journey. Nausea roiled. The figure outside was a constant, appearing on whichever side she faced. She moved deliberately to the last row, positioning herself by a window on the opposite side from his usual haunt. He materialized there too, his archaic clothes rippling silently in the unseen wind. The train's drone filled her ears. Her eyes burned from the strain of watching, of not blinking. In the reflection, her own face stared back, pale, eyes wide with a terror that mirrored the unchanging intensity of the watcher beyond the glass. He still clutched the symbol. Then slowly, he lifted it, angling it towards her, as if demanding her focus. Closer to the window he brought it. Ilara leaned in, peering. A metal plaque, dark lines intricately etched upon its surface. Letters? Markings? Runes? Her mind, overloaded, couldn't decipher them. Time dissolved. Ilara drifted between cars, a ghost haunting her own inescapable journey, caught between the desperate need to escape his gaze and the morbid compulsion to ensure he hadn't vanished. She attempted conversation again with an older man in the second car. He just shrugged, muttered something about her acting strangely, and turned away. The lights flickered more erratically now, a visible decay. A cold draft snaked through the carriage from an unknown source. Then, another station announcement. The voice distorted, barely intelligible, but the name registered. Hope, sharp and painful, flared anew. She stood poised by the door, fists clenched as the train slowed. The instant the brakes groaned, she stabbed the button. It yielded. A crack opened, revealing a slice of platform, a waiting bench. Then slam, shut again. She hammered the button futilely, kicked the unyielding metal, the sound echoing in the near-empty space. A couple of heads turned briefly, then dismissed her. Her throat felt raw. She paced before the sealed exit until the train resumed its relentless forward motion. Her legs felt like lead. There was no ignoring him now. He was part of this. Every shuddering breath she took seemed contingent on his presence. Sweat trickled down her spine. Defeated, she slumped into a random seat, letting her head fall back against the rest, closing her eyes for a fleeting second. Blocking out the visual didn't erase the sense of him, just outside. When she opened her eyes, he was there, his stare somehow more intense, more penetrating. "What do you want?" she whispered, the words barely audible above the train's rumble. Her gaze fell again upon the symbol. He pressed it flat against the glass, a deliberate presentation. Squinting, Ilara traced the etched lines with her eyes. They seemed to form patterns, complex intersections. A map? Instructions? A strange, involuntary impulse flowed through her. Her arm lifted, seemingly of its own accord, reaching towards the window. Her fingertips made contact with the cold, smooth surface. Across the barrier, he mirrored the gesture, his gloved hand aligning with hers, separated only by the thin sheet of glass. No tangible connection, yet a circuit seemed to complete. Her heart rate, though still elevated, found a slightly steadier rhythm. After a few suspended seconds, as if a silent transaction had occurred, he withdrew his hand. He drifted back slightly from the window. A powerful gust buffeted the train, momentarily obscuring him. Her stomach clenched tight. Rising, desperate to confirm he hadn't simply dissolved, she stepped into the vial, gripping seat backs for support. Then she saw him, further down, by the next window, moving steadily towards the front of the train. She followed. A numb tingling spread through her legs, her feet moving as if guided by an external will, overriding the screaming instinct to cower. Through the rattling, wind-whipped gangway, between cars she passed, her ears popping, peering through the next door's window, she saw him paused outside, waiting for her arrival. She slid the door open and stepped into another empty carriage, the lights dimmer still, accompanied by a faint, high-pitched electrical whine. Halfway down the aisle, a harsh metallic screech erupted from outside, like claws dragged along the train's flank. Whipping her head towards the sound, she saw him pressing the edge of the sigil against the metal exterior frame. Tiny sparks showered downwards. He watched her reaction even as he carved, etching lines into the train's skin, lines mirroring those on the symbol itself. Ilara gritted her teeth, her hands trembling uselessly at her sides. What was he doing? How could she possibly intervene? Pressing her forehead against the cool glass, she saw the fresh gouges in the paintwork. He lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers directly. A new, deeper cold permeated her. The train lurched violently, throwing her off balance. Grabbing a seat, she steadied herself. When she looked back, he was already moving on, gliding towards the next window, the next carriage, and she followed. Her footfalls echoed heavily in the emptiness. Her throat was parched. Fragments of rational thought surfaced. Break a window, find the emergency brake. But her body remained sluggish, unresponsive, caught in his invisible current. Her mind felt fractured, scattered. She simply followed. A puppet drawn through car after empty car. At each station stop, the same futile struggle. The rush to the door, the brief hope as it opened for unseen others, the crushing finality as it sealed against her, the frantic, useless assault on buttons and levers. Always, he was there, just outside, ensuring her captivity. Finally, the front car, a few seats, the sealed door to the operator's cabin. She tried the handle, locked. Through the wide front window, only the endless ribbon of track receding into darkness. The steady thrum of the engine beneath her feet. No sign of the figure there. Turning, she scanned the side windows, and there he was, hovering near the exterior access to the operator's cabin. He raised his hand, pressing the sigil to the glass one last time. Elara watched, mesmerized. The urge to scream, to cry for help, rose and died in her throat. There was no one left to hear. He lowered the symbol. For the first time, his lips moved, shaping silent words. Though no sound penetrated the carriage, she could see the articulation, sense the unspoken message. Stay. Her breathing slowed, becoming strangely even. Her heart still thudded a heavy rhythm, but an odd sense of calm settled in her chest. The calm of inevitability, choice seemed an illusion. The train sped on. The infrequent stations became mere flickers of light. The last few passengers had vanished at unseen stops, leaving her utterly alone in the humming metal shell. The announcement system had long fallen silent. The cabin door remained impenetrable. Her phone, a useless brick. She sat near the window watching him. He watched her. His face remained an enigma, devoid of anger, fear, or any discernible emotion. She searched his eyes for a clue, a hint of purpose. Uncertainty twisted within her. Yet she remained seated. The vibrations from the track hummed through her bones. The journey stretched into an undefined expanse of time, marked only by the rhythmic clatter and the failed escapes at phantom stations. Her body ached from sustained tension, her throat raw from shallow, anxious breaths. The landscape outside was an unchanging canvas of darkness. A subtle shift in the lighting, a flicker in the train's power, then a gradual deceleration. No station lights this time. They rolled slowly onto a dark, isolated stretch of track and came to a complete halt. Elara stood, peering through the front window. Nothing but absolute blackness. She glanced sideways. He was still there, intimately close. She tried the door, locked, reached for the emergency lever, immovable. Looking back at him, she saw his hand resting on the exterior handle, a spectral jailer holding her fast. The lights flickered again, the engine's hum fading to silence. Only the weak emergency lights persisted, casting long, eerie shadows. The air grew heavy, stale. Pressing her ear to the operator's cabin door yielded nothing. A knock elicited no response. Her reflection swam in the dark window pane, a pale, hollow-eyed stranger. She turned back to the figure, hovering, waiting, gripping the back of the nearest seat, her legs trembling. She forced slow, deliberate breaths. "Why?" she asked, her voice a shaky whisper swallowed by the silence. "Why are you here?" No answer came, none expected, but he didn't leave. He pressed the sigil against the glass one final time. Leaning forward, she stared at it, the intricate lines seeming to pulse faintly in the gloom, almost resolving into a pattern, a map, a key. Her head throbbed. Closing her eyes briefly, she opened them again. He hadn't moved. The train was utterly still around her, save for the faint electrical buzz. A final hiss from the brakes, then absolute silence descended. Trapped, the realization settled, cold and heavy. Perhaps acceptance was the only path forward. She remained in her seat, every muscle taut, unsure what came next. Only that he demanded her presence. This is her reality now. Seated in the silent carriage, the figure a constant sentinel just beyond the glass, clearly visible in the faint, undying light. He hasn't wavered, hasn't vanished. He waits, and Ilara is not going anywhere. No clue when motion will resume, when the doors will consent to release her. Only the certainty that she cannot leave until this silent, terrifying transaction is complete. Only the knowledge that he will remain her spectral companion until she understands. How long her composure will hold is uncertain, but choice has evaporated. There is only the train, the figure, and the suffocating weight in the heart of the night. Until it ends, she's here, staring back. Who could fathom needing nocturnal illumination merely to inhabit one's own walls without dread? Yet barely a week within this unassuming townhouse, and that precise absurdity became my ritual. The structure itself is neither grand nor ancient, nestled on a street so placid, neighbors exchanged nods over the drone of weekend lawnmowers. This very tranquility had beckoned, a promised balm after draining workdays. Instead, I stumbled into an enigma, intangible yet oppressively real. Something my senses grapple with, but my reason cannot grasp. I am the sole occupant. Every alcove, every shadow has been meticulously scrutinized. Dismissal proved futile. Investigation yielded nothing. Only this constant, almost defiant blaze against the night keeps the peculiar resonance at bay. My tenancy commenced at the month's dawn. A simple attached dwelling, the advertisement read, sharing a single wall with the property to the east. Its previous inhabitant left it pristine. Lease signed, keys in hand, my belongings followed on a Friday afternoon. That inaugural weekend unfolded with comforting banality. Unpacking cartons, coaxing the television to life, positioning the sofa, assembling the bed frame in the upper chamber. All felt right. The promised quietude held. From the adjoining unit, silence reigned. The neighbor's vehicle, a phantom presence, was seldom seen. A welcome respite. No thumping bass, no discordant shouts. Monday reinstated the familiar cadence of employment. Office hours conclude near 6. The commute deposits me home weary. A swift meal, a flicker of television, the clatter of dishes, then a scent to slumber. This rhythm held for several unremarkable days. The disturbance began subtly. Midweek, likely Wednesday. Slumber fractured near 2 a.m. I surfaced slowly, adrift in that murky space between sleep and waking. A sound, delicate initially, like the faint, sharp music of ice splintering or perhaps tiny glass fragments stirred by an unseen hand. Its origin remained elusive, within these walls or beyond. I pushed myself upright, thumbed the bedside lamp. Instantly, silence fell, absolute. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum in the sudden stillness. Confusion, tinged with lingering sleep, fogged my thoughts. A dream fragment, perhaps. Motionless, I waited, listening. Nothing. Minutes stretched. Eventually, I extinguished the light, seeking refuge once more in sleep. Darkness had barely reclaimed the room when the sound returned, no louder, yet possessing a distinct, crystalline sharpness. It evoked images of shattered ornaments shaken within a confined space, or wind whistling through unseen cracks, agitating something fragile. Barefoot, I crept into the hallway, muscles taut, fingers tracing the cool plaster for balance. I slapped the switch, flooding the corridor with light. Again. The sound ceased mid-breath, as if snipped by shears. The illumination carved stark shadows, revealing nothing amiss. Clad only in sleep shorts, I stood scanning the stairwell, the landing. Only the low, familiar thrum of the refrigerator drifted up from below. Sleep now felt utterly remote. A nervous energy propelled me through the house room by room. The hall closet yielded nothing. Downstairs, the kitchen stood silent sentinel. Behind the humming fridge, emptiness. The living room furniture sat undisturbed. No glittering debris, no displaced object hinted at the source of that crystalline chatter. Until nearly 4, I remained vigilant, bathed in artificial daylight. Every attempt to douse the lamps met with a surge of adrenaline. Exhaustion finally drove me to compromise. All lights off save a small lamp casting a lonely pool in the living room. I collapsed onto the sofa. The sound resumed, though muted now. A mere whisper of its former self. Pipes, I told myself. Settling noises, some explicable quirk. Sheer fatigue dragged me under, despite the faint, persistent rattling. The strident call of my phone alarm at 7 jolted me awake. The sound was gone. Dawnlight filtered through the blinds. The kitchen appeared stubbornly normal. The subsequent night, I armored myself with denial. Dinner, television, then bed, plunging the house into deliberate darkness, feigning normalcy. It held until perhaps 1:30. Then the familiar clinking scrape, a sound like fine sand mixed with glass shards being stirred, tore me from sleep. Adrenaline surged, hot and immediate. My hand flew to the lamp switch. Silence crashed down. Heart pounding, a sheen of cold perspiration prickling my forehead, I cursed under my breath. Resigned, I swung my legs out of bed, retrieved a heavy torch from the nightstand, and descended the stairs, leaving the bedroom light burning like a beacon behind me while the lower floor remained submerged in shadow. Instantly, the noise began anew, seemingly aware, almost responsive. It emanated, or so it felt, from the living room wall. The partition shared with the elusive neighbor. The torch beam swept across the plaster, revealing no fissures, no imperfections. My knuckles rapped against the surface, solid, unyielding. I flicked the main living room light switch. The sound vanished, utterly. My torch beam trembled, betraying the tremor in my hand. A wave of something akin to violation washed over me, the sense of being toyed with. Slow, deliberate breaths. Then, bracing myself, I killed the light again. It returned. Immediately. A visceral clench in my gut. The fine hairs on my arms prickled upright. The distinct, unsettling resonance of glass grinding against glass. Or something chillingly similar. Standing there in the oppressive dark became unbearable. Light flooded the room once more. Thereafter began a systematic, almost forensic examination. The basement beckoned, cool and smelling of dust and time. I unearthed boxes left by the predecessor. Forlorn Christmas baubles, the fractured base of a lamp, a stack of chip plates. Nothing stirred, nothing broken in a way that could replicate that specific, sharp cadence. I listened for the telltale scrabble of rodents, searched for the signs of infestation. Only dust motes danced in the torchlight. A faint chill permeated the space, but that felt ordinary enough. By 3 a.m., frayed and defeated, I surrendered. Every light in the house blazed, save for the small closet beneath the stairs. Within its pocket of darkness, curiously, silence persisted. It seemed the overall luminescence mattered. Pockets of shadow were tolerated if the house itself felt lit. Exhausted, I finally slept under the glare, waking with a throbbing headache, but, crucially, rested. The ensuing days were consumed by the puzzle. I ventured a cautious inquiry with the woman to my left, whose house stood detached. Had she noticed any nocturnal disturbances? Plumbing groans, odd structural sounds? She offered a placid negative, spoke of peaceful nights. The glass noise remained my secret, cloaked in a vague embarrassment. Mentioning the neighbor attached to my wall felt necessary, yet his continued absence thwarted any approach. His windows remained dark voids, his car rarely present. Contact seemed impossible. One evening, an experiment. I preemptively illuminated the entire house before retiring. A wasteful extravagance perhaps, but desperation gnawed. Small lamps augmented overhead fixtures in the kitchen and hall. The bedroom glowed softly. I lay in bed, braced for the familiar intrusion around midnight or 1. Nothing. Sleep came swift and deep, lasting unbroken until the morning alarm. Relief washed over me, potent and cleansing. Had it been merely a phantasm of darkness, a trick of an overtired mind? Deep down, a persistent doubt lingered. The experience felt too visceral, too consistent. The following night, drawn by a compulsive need for certainty, I tested the shadows once more. Total darkness. I commanded myself to remain calm, rationalized it as an eccentric house settling. An hour, perhaps less, was all it took. That scraping, rattling susurrus returned, seeming to slither along the baseboards, perhaps beneath the floor itself. Its location remained maddeningly ambiguous. My heart launched into a frantic rhythm, a stinging heat behind my eyes, hands clenching into fists beneath the covers. Breath hitched, shallow and rapid. Fear mingled with profound bewilderment. The bedside lamp flared to life, the noise cut off mid-scrape, absolute in its cessation. In that stark, illuminated silence, I conceded. This was no mundane household groan. Pipes do not cease their gurgling, no wind it's whistling, no timbers they're settling merely because a switch is flipped. They lack such precise reactive malice. For sanity's sake, for the simple, blessed relief of sleep, the lamp stayed on for the remainder of the week. A foolish tableau, perhaps, this house perpetually lit against the night, but necessary. Darkness now bred phantoms in my mind, priming me for that awful glassy friction. Light, however, held the silence. Saturday afforded daylight hours for renewed scrutiny. Furniture migrated away from walls, revealing unblemished plaster. Taps ran, pipes were listened to, drains inspected. I even resorted to rapping firmly on the shared wall, listening for hollow echoes or a telltale vibration of something loose, something broken. Nothing. Ceilings were scanned for water stains, beams for stress. The house presented itself as sound, solid. A pang of guilt surfaced. Blaming the structure felt unjust. Yet the incontrovertible fact remained. The sound lived only in darkness, died instantly in light. That same evening, another tentative foray into dimness. Watching a film, the overhead light off, the television screen casting flickering, insufficient illumination. During a quiet passage, I muted the audio. It returned. A faint clicking, a dry rustling, like skeletal fingers sifting through shards in a thin plastic sack. My pulse leaped. A nearby table lamp clicked on. Silence resumed its reign. My stomach remained knotted. The rush of blood thrummed in my ears. Showing fear in my own sanctuary felt weak, yet the unease was undeniable. The lamp remained lit for the duration. Fleeting thoughts of escape, a hotel room, a night away to clear my head, surfaced only to founder on practicality and tight finances. Inviting company felt like the next logical step, but connections here are sparse, nascent. My work offers little fertile ground for easy friendships, so I remained alone, the pattern starkly, unnervingly consistent. Darkness invites the sound. Light banishes it, not gradually, not intermittently, instantly. Bedroom, living room, hallway, the location irrelevant. Darkness was the key, light the immediate antidote. And so I write this now at my small dining table, bathed in the glow of every overhead fixture. The house feels unnaturally bright for the late hour, stark, almost clinical. But it is quiet. The impending utility bill looms, a tangible price for tranquility, yet preferable to the cold dread that prickles my neck in the dark. Preferable to lying awake, straining to hear infinitesimal movements within the walls, in some unseen corner. I won't label it supernatural. Perhaps faulty wiring reacts strangely to load changes, or the neighbor possesses some arcane device triggered by ambient silence. But neither theory adequately explains the instantaneous cessation upon illumination. The puzzle remains unsolved. I cling to the hope of eventual understanding, but for now, an uneasy truce exists. My nights are relentlessly bright and blessedly free of that grating, crystalline clamor, only occasionally entering a room momentarily unlit. The bathroom, perhaps, forgetting the switch. Do I catch a fleeting scrape, a ghost of the sound, sending my heart lurching into my throat? My hand flies to the switch. Light blooms, silence descends. Curiosity about the neighbor persists. His car appears sporadically in the drive, yet his windows remain stubbornly dark, lifeless. The resolve, the right casual pretext to knock, remains elusive. What could I possibly articulate? "Excuse me, does your house sound like shattered glass having a party after midnight?" The sheer absurdity chills the impulse until a more plausible narrative forms. Silence seems the wiser course. The awareness that this might be my permanent reality is a heavy cloak. Danger feels unlikely, yet the pervasive unease is undeniable. The landlord? Perhaps she holds a piece of the puzzle, but the fear of dismissal, of being branded eccentric or neurotic, stays my hand. Rent paid, problem solved. That might be her pragmatic view. So here I reside, in a townhouse utterly unremarkable to the passing eye, save for its nightly, incandescent glow, a place where darkness itself seems to summon a sound like broken things being stirred. If advice was solicited by a prospective tenant, I'd suggest stocking up on bulbs. Strange counsel, I know, but it's the only defense I possess. It keeps the crawling sensation from my chest when the sound used to begin. It permits relaxation. In the pursuit of normalcy within these four walls, the house will remain bright against the night. My ears remain open. A definitive answer may never surface. For now, this is the accepted condition. Inhabiting a space where extinguishing the lights invites an inexplicable chorus. The suburban peace remains outside. Traffic hushed, neighbors discreet. Inside, however, darkness holds its own peculiar resonance. There's a strange, fragile comfort in knowing the remedy lies as close as the nearest light switch, even absent the why. So I exist here, lights blazing, nights blessedly free of the clinking rattle, days spent wrestling with the unsettling possibility of something missed, something fundamental overlooked. Passers-by likely see the lit windows and assume fear of intruders or simple insomnia. Let them. One day, perhaps, familiarity will breed tolerance, allowing sleep in darkness without that unnerving accompaniment. Until then, it's myself, the lamps and the purchased silence, holding the glassy sound at bay. That is how it must remain. Stillness claimed me the instant those stifled lamentations seeped from behind the locked door down the corridor. Elsewhere, my house breathed its usual quietude. Kitchen shadows slept undisturbed. The living room held its breath. The whole lamp emitted its familiar, low hum. Yet that night, a raw, burdened sound emanated from that forbidden space, prickling the skin along my forearms into sharp relief. Months had passed since I'd ventured near that room. A void in the floor plan, unused, deliberately sealed and ignored. But those sounds, they frayed my composure. Keys retrieved, I moved towards the disturbance. That was the evening the chair materialized. Centered in the vacant room, stark against the emptiness I knew should be there. Now, merely passing that threshold sends an icy tremor beneath my skin. Occasionally, the vacant seat stares squarely at the door, a silent wooden sentinel anticipating my arrival. Permit me to unravel this chronologically, to illuminate the roots of this persistent unease. This house became mine several years prior. 2 bedrooms, a functional kitchen, a modest living area. Remote work necessitated an office, or so I reasoned. But upon settling in, some intrinsic resistance kept me from establishing it. The room itself repelled me. Stark white walls, cheap tiled flooring, a lone window, gazing streetward. Each entry felt like stepping into a sudden drop in temperature. Initially, I left the door ajar, but sheer pointlessness of the space, its unwelcoming aura, eventually prompted me to lock it away. The spare key resided in a kitchen drawer, an object of utter indifference until that night. It was late, perhaps 11. I sat immersed in the flickering banality of television when a muted thud resonated through the floorboards. Faint, easily dismissed. House settling, a neighbor's clumsiness. Then it morphed, a sound akin to muffled weeping or groans stifled by heavy fabric. I silenced the television, straining to listen. Unmistakably, it originated from the hallway. My pulse quickened, drumming against my ribs. Plumbing, I told myself, just eccentric old pipes. But the sound persisted. Rhythmic bursts like speech forced through a gag. Rising, I crept towards the corridor. The spare room door remained shut, impassive as ever. As I drew closer, the moaning intensified fractionally. A chill, profound and invasive, coiled in my chest. My hand found the doorknob, locked naturally. A flicker of self-reproach. I always kept it locked. Was this merely frayed nerves? Auditory hallucination? Retreating to the kitchen, I rummaged through the clutter until my fingers closed around the cool metal of the key. Back at the door, breath held tight, I slid the key home. It turned without resistance. The muffled sounds continued, thin and strained. Pushing the door inward revealed only darkness, the familiar rectangular void. But the lamentations ceased abruptly. Silence crashed down, tightening its grip around my chest. My fingers fumbled along the wall, finding the switch. A click, a flicker, and the overhead bulb cast a weak, sterile light. The room was bare, utterly bare, save for a single wooden chair positioned directly in its center. 4 simple legs, a flat, unadorned back. I knew, with unshakable certainty, I had never introduced furniture into this space. None whatsoever. Yet there it stood. Rooted in the doorway, I stared, anticipating something. My heart hammered, breath coming in ragged gasps, but the room offered only silence. No groans, no creaks, no whispers of movement. Tentatively, I stepped inside, the cold floor shocking through my socks. I circled the chair, scanning it, the surrounding floor, searching for explanation. It appeared ordinary. Minor scratches marred the seat, edges softened by time. Nothing remarkable. My hand reached out, touched the wooden back. Smooth, yet unnervingly cold. My gaze flickered to the window, locked securely from within. The entire room, sealed from the outside by my own hand. No ingress possible. No logical explanation for the chair's presence. Yet, I hadn't put it there. Confusion warred with the rising tide of fear, twisting my insides. I backed away slowly, eyes fixed on the chair, then flipped the light switch, plunging the room back into darkness. The door clicked shut behind me. Locking it again, I noted the tremor in my hands. Sleep offered little refuge that night, haunted by the image of the solitary chair, straining for sounds that never returned. Morning light brought a flimsy attempt at rationality. Perhaps I had moved it there sometime Inexplicably forgotten? The notion felt absurd, yet I clung to it, trying to dispel the unease. Days slipped by. Silence reigned at night, but the corridor near that door became a pocket of unnatural cold, usually warmed by afternoon sun. That specific stretch now felt like stepping across an invisible thermal boundary. Goose flesh would erupt on my arms, urging a swift retreat. Then, one morning, heading out for errands, an irresistible compulsion drew me back. Keys in hand, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I hesitated. Did I truly want to confront whatever lay beyond? The need to verify, to disprove the trickery of my own mind, won out. Unlocking the door, swinging it wide, activating the light, the chair remained. But its orientation had shifted. Not dramatically, but perceptibly, angled towards the doorway. Towards me. A subtle rotation, yet undeniably different. I slammed the door shut, locking it hastily, and fled the house. My hand shook as I secured the front door, my mind racing through impossible scenarios. Had it always been slightly askew? Had I simply failed to notice? Deep down, I knew better. It felt deliberate, repositioned by an unseen occupant, waiting. I drove aimlessly, errands forgotten, the image of the watchful chair burning behind my eyes. Tension coiled in my neck. Returning later, bathed in the relative courage of mid-afternoon sunlight filtering through the living room window, I forced myself to look again. Around 3 p.m. Braver now, I approached the spare room, unlocked it, illuminated the interior. Still there, still angled towards the threshold. Nothing else amiss. Window locked, corners vacant, no scuffs or prints marred the cheap tiles. Yet the sensation of being observed prickled the nape of my neck. My stomach churned. Locking the door once more, I retreated to the living room, seeking calm that wouldn't come. That section of the house became avoided territory. My gaze would snag on the door from the corner of my eye, half expecting it to swing open. Nights involved meticulous checks of windows and locks. Faint creaks or sighs from the house previously ignored now sparked alertness. I dismissed them. Old plumbing, wind, refusing to voice the growing dread. Though my body remained perpetually tense. Perhaps a week later, a new disturbance. Lying in bed, drifting towards sleep, a single, sharp thump echoed from the hallway, like something solid dropped onto the floorboards. My heart seized. Rolling onto my side, I stared at my own bedroom door, paralysis warring with the need to investigate. Reluctantly, I slid from bed, creeping into the hall. The spare room door loomed closed. My hand reached for the knob. Cold, colder than the ambient air, I turned it. Click. Locked as I'd left it. Pressing my ear to the wood yielded nothing. No moans, no thumps, absolute silence. I retreated to bed, mind spinning uselessly. The following morning, seeking an anchor of normalcy, I called Matteo. Practical, level-headed Matteo. I recounted the noises, the inexplicable chair, trying to sound casual. He chuckled, predictably suggesting overactive imagination. "Come see for yourself," I urged. He arrived that afternoon. I led him directly to the door, unlocked it. The chair stood within, but seemingly returned to its original neutral position. Matteo stood in the doorway, arms crossed, skepticism etched on his face. He entered, circled the chair, checked the window, tapped the walls. He even sat in it briefly. Nothing. "Elias," he declared, "it's just a chair. Maybe the previous owner left it. You probably just forgot." Frustration simmered beneath my forced calm. I knew something was wrong, but arguing felt futile. We left the room, shared a beer, discussed mundane topics. He departed near dusk, leaving me alone once more. The fragile sense of reassurance his visit provided evaporated the moment I passed that door after dark. The familiar wave of cold washing over me. Ignoring it became my strategy, frayed though it was. Days later, fueled by annoyance and exhaustion from the constant fear, I approached the door again. The key met resistance in the lock, unusual for its typically smooth mechanism. Finally, it yielded. I flicked the switch. The chair now faced the wall, completely turned away from the door. My skin crawled. The air felt heavy, stale, and that prickling sensation returned to the back of my neck. Entering, I touched the chair, intending to reposition it. My hands recoiled. The wood felt glacial, as if stored in a freezer. A momentary hesitation. Then I forced myself, hands slick with sweat, to grasp it again, dragging it nearer the window simply to alter the configuration. Locking the door behind me, I paced the living room, heart thundering, mind a chaotic jumble of fear and rising anger. Was someone breaching my home? A frantic survey followed. Every window latch, every door bolt, every conceivable point of entry. Secure. I even ventured into the dusty, silent attic. Empty. Downstairs, the house felt ordinary, except for the locus of dread that was the spare room. That night, I resolved to keep vigil. Sitting on the hallway floor, outside the spare room, light extinguished, I listened. Back aching, legs cramping, I stared at the door's faint outline in the gloom. The house offered only the low thrum of the refrigerator. An hour passed in fruitless silence. As I finally rose to abandon the watch, a soft scrape whispered from the other side, the distinct sound of chair legs moving across the floor. I froze, hand braced against the wall, breath catching in my throat. Unlock the door? Check. The impulse died, strangled by sheer terror. I fled to my bedroom, secured the door, and lay rigid in bed, pulse hammering. Over the subsequent week, I avoided opening that door entirely. Yet, each passage provoked the icy blast, raising goose flesh despite my resolve. Concentration fractured. Conversations felt hollow, shadowed by the secret I couldn't share and couldn't ignore. Strange dreams began, finding myself seated in that very chair, in the dark room, staring fixedly at my own bedroom door. Waking drenched in sweat, the clock face inevitably displaying the dead hour near 3 a.m. Finally, one sunlit morning, resolve hardened by sleeplessness and frustration, I decided. Open the door, remove the chair, confront the emptiness. I marched towards it, determination warring with a tight knot of anxiety in my chest. It's just a room, just furniture, I chanted internally. The key turned, the light flickered on. The chair faced the door again, but it was closer now, inches forward, diminishing the space between it and the threshold. I stood paralyzed, hand clamped on the doorknob, limbs leaden. A stinging heat bloomed behind my eyes. Nerves, frustration, fear. Forcing motion, I advanced, grasped the chair's top rail, and pulled. The scraping sound it made seemed obscenely loud in the confined space. Heart pounding like a drum against my ribs, I dragged it out into the corridor, leaning it against the adjacent wall. A moment of breathless anticipation. Would unseen hands snatch it back? Nothing. A long, shuddering exhale escaped me. I peered back into the room. Empty, bare walls, floor, window, no lurking shadows. Leaving the door ajar, I turned towards the living room. Halfway down the hall, the cold returned, a palpable wave washing over my back. I spun around. The spare room door slammed shut with violent finality. A strangled gasp escaped me. My hands flew up trembling. The chair remained in the hall, exonerated. Tentatively, I took a step towards the now closed door. Hand outstretched, but faltered. The knob seemed impossibly menacing. My mouth was dust dry, legs threatening to buckle. And so it remains. The chair rests in the hallway, an awkward sentinel against the wall. I haven't dared to open that door since. The chill persists, a localized haunting whenever I pass. Sometimes, late at night, a muffled sound seems to brush against my hearing, but investigation is unthinkable. The tension is a permanent resident in my chest. That initial discovery replays endlessly. The chair, anomalous in the dark, violating the sanctity of a locked room. Logic dictates I should flee this house, abandon it. Yet, a strange inertia holds me captive. This was meant to be my sanctuary. Behind that door lies what? I cannot know without turning the key again. A prospect that chills me more profoundly than the room itself. All I know is the space felt wrong from the beginning. An empty room, a single window. Nothing more, I tell myself. But the cold is undeniable. The sounds were real. The chair's inexplicable migrations were real. Understanding eludes me, and perhaps I prefer it that way. For now, avoidance is my shield. That part of the house is surrendered territory. Perhaps someday courage or desperation will compel me to confront it. Maybe even remove the door entirely. Until then, I navigate my own home like a trespasser, sleeping under artificial light, waiting, always waiting for the dawn. It began as less than a sound, a mere insinuation breathed into the sterile quiet of a Tuesday night. Elara, veteran of 1,000 graveyard shifts at St. Jude's Infirmary, initially dismissed it. Another sigh from the building's ancient bones, perhaps the wind worrying the eaves. 10 years navigating these shadowed halls, where the rhythmic sigh of ventilators and the low thrum of life support composed the nocturnal symphony, had taught her a certain auditory numbness. Yet this thread of sound felt alien, discordant, wrong. 2 bells chimed somewhere deep within the hospital's heart, marking the hour. It was then, under the buzzing insistence of the corridor's fluorescent tubes, that the susurrus sharpened, seeming to coalesce, pinpointing itself to room 237, an anomaly. Elara consulted her round sheet, the crisp paper a stark contrast to the creeping unease. 237 stood vacant, its previous soul discharged with the morning sun. A pause, her knuckles hovering millimeters from the cool wood. Prudence warred with duty. A familiar conflict in the lonely hours. Duty won. A slow exhale, and the door yielded inwards. Ink-black darkness greeted her, absolute save for a phantom gleam of dormant monitors against the far wall. The air hung thick, still, expectant. A meticulously made bed, its white sheets taut, drawn curtains obscuring the night, silent machinery standing sentinel, a tableau of recent departure, clinically precise. But the whisper remained, a silken thread weaving through the silence, seeming to emanate not from a single point, but from the very molecules of the air. A pressure building behind the eyes, suffocating. "Is someone present?" Ilara's voice, tight, unnaturally loud, fractured the stillness. Silence answered, profound and heavy, save for that ceaseless, sibilant murmur. Her fingers, clumsy with a sudden tremor she couldn't control, fumbled along the wall, finding the plate. A stutter, a hesitant flicker, and harsh light flooded the space, bleaching the shadows instantaneously. And the walls. Dear God, the walls. No longer the institutional sterile white she expected, but a canvas of nightmare. Intricate sigils, twisting, spiraling in Escher-like complexity, seemed to pulse under the electric glare, rendered in a viscous oxidizing crimson that could only be one thing: blood. The unmistakable, metallic tang hit her nostrils, acrid and thick, as the horrifying realization struck. The glyphs were painted in blood. A choked gasp escaped her as she recoiled, spine colliding hard with the doorframe. The susurrus swelled immediately, no longer faint, but coalescing into distinct, overlapping voices. Pleas and promises hideously tangled. "Help us. Join us. You cannot escape." Raw instinct screamed flight. Her hands flew to her ears, a futile gesture against the sound now seemingly blooming from within her own skull, insidious and invasive. Phone. Security. Her trembling fingers stabbed at the smooth glass screen. No bars. Dead signal. Utterly disconnected. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. She lunged for the exit, hand closing around the metal doorknob. Searing agony. A cry ripped from her as she snatched her hand back, staring in disbelief at the angry red welt already blooming on her palm. Steam curled faintly from the metal, glowing with a dull, infernal heat. The door, her only escape, was sealed, imprisoned. Forcing down the rising bile, Elara compelled her gaze back to the sanguine tapestry dominating the room. Amidst the arcane geometry, words swam into focus, scrawled hastily in the same grim medium. "The veil thins. They approach. Make ready." A glacial dread traced its path down her spine, colder than any winter night. Who? What was coming? The patient call button beside the bed. A desperate, fragile hope. Her finger jabbed the plastic knob. Silence. No answering chime from the nurse's station. No comforting blink from the indicator light in the hall. It was as if the room had been surgically excised from reality. Adrift in some terrible, isolated void. The whispers escalated, reaching a fever pitch. A cacophony of demanding voices. A vortex of sound threatening to shred her sanity. Ritual nears completion. Your life opens the path. We thirst. The very air crackled, growing heavy, thick with an unseen static energy that raised the fine hairs on her arms and neck. She looked up, breath catching in her throat. A collective gasp seemed to shudder through the room, though she was alone. The blood glyphs writhed, no longer static symbols, but living, undulating things. They flowed like liquid mercury, converged, spun into a dizzying vortex at the room's epicenter. Reality fractured. A shimmering tear appeared in the air before her, widening, stretching, a ragged gateway into abyssal darkness. Beyond it, shapes coalesced, impossible geometries, undulating appendages slick with unknown fluids, and eyes, countless eyes gleaming with ancient, soul-freezing hunger, fixing upon her, their sole focus. The whispers peaked, transcendent language, becoming a primal shriek of imminent arrival and ravenous triumph. This was it, the culmination. Whatever madness had been invoked, whatever horrors summoned, were poised to breach the threshold, and she, Elara, was the unwitting sacrifice, the welcome mat. In that instant, poised on the precipice of unimaginable horror, something primal ignited within her, terror transmuted into desperate, ferocious action. Her eyes, wide with fear but sharp with adrenaline, locked onto the gleaming steel of an ivy pole standing forgotten in the corner. With a surge of strength born of pure, existential dread, she ripped it free from its base, hefting the makeshift weapon. She swung, a raw cry tearing from her lungs, metal impacting the nascent portal. A sound like 1,000 panes of glass shattering simultaneously reverberated through the small room. Chaos erupted. The whispers fractured into shrieks of agony and incoherent fury. The symbols bled down the walls like weeping wounds, dissolving. The gateway pulsed violently, recoiled, the horrors beyond thrashing in frustrated rage. Again and again she struck, pouring every iota of terror and defiance into the assault. Then, as abruptly as it began, a profound silence fell, a final implosion, like a vast cosmic intake of breath, and the portal vanished. The symbols were gone. The walls, impossibly, were pristine white once more. Elara stood, chest heaving, the bent ivy pole clutched in white-knuckled fists. The room breathed normalcy, stark and absolute, mocking her recent terror. A hallucination? Stress-induced psychosis? But the throbbing, undeniable burn on her palm screamed otherwise. And there, stark against the polished linoleum near her feet, lay a single, damning bead of crimson. Proof, tangible evidence of the nightmare. Legs unsteady, feeling like brittle glass, she reached for the door. The knob, now blessedly cool, turned easily. She stumbled out, emerging into the familiar humming corridor, blinking against the unflinching fluorescent light. The distant rhythmic chime of monitors, the squeak of unseen cartwheels down a distant hall. The hospital's mundane pulse had resumed, as if nothing had occurred. She drifted towards the nurse's station, moving as if through water. Maya glanced up from her charting, concern etching lines around her tired eyes. "Elara, are you all right? You look like you wrestled a demon." Elara opened her mouth, the story a frantic bird beating against the cage of her ribs. How to articulate the impossible? How to voice the madness she'd witnessed, fought, survived? The words died unborn, strangled by disbelief and the certainty of disbelief. A shaky smile surfaced, a poor imitation of reassurance. "Fine," she managed, the lie tasting like ash on her tongue. "Just a long night." Yet, resuming the familiar cadence of her duties offered no solace, no return to the comforting shores of the known. A profound shift had occurred deep within her. She had peered beyond the veil, into something ancient, vast, and utterly inimical, and worse, she had felt its cold, calculating gaze lock upon her soul. Now, in the deep silences that punctuated the night, in those moments between the heartbeats of the sleeping hospital when shadows pooled thickly in the corners, she sometimes fancied she heard it. The faintest echo, a sibilant breath against the shell of her ear, whispering promises of return. This harrowing night, she knew with chilling, unshakable certainty, was merely a prelude. Solitude wasn't a preference. It was a necessity, a balm sought in the deep green hush of the wilderness. I chased it down countless trails. The forest, my steadfast, silent confidant. Fear held no purchase there, amidst the cathedral stillness, far from the world's glamour. Yet, this particular excursion began under a different star. A prickling awareness, perhaps? The familiar woods seemed suddenly sentient. The air charged, heavy as unshed rain. A foolish dismissal, that initial tremor of unease. Digital whispers led me to this one, a supposed jewel, sequestered from common tread, promised online as an untouched sanctuary, perfect. The lure was absolute solitude, the melody of boot soles on earth, the sighing pines, my only companions. Reaching it required navigating forgotten back roads to where civilization frayed. No formal welcome here, just a weathered plank, half swallowed by brambles, leaning drunkenly beside a scuff of stones that served as parking. My pack was light, my intentions simple. A few hours swallowed by the woods. Initially, the path unspooled predictably. A ribbon of packed earth slicing through dense timber, ascending gentle slopes beneath the canopy that fractured sunlight into fleeting coins. Peace settled, the familiar welcome quietude. But perhaps an hour dissolved, maybe more, before the shift began. The path, once definite, started to unravel at the edges, its definition bleeding into the leaf litter, surrendering to the encroaching green. Had I strayed? A pause, a slow rotation. Nothing. No fork, no alternative. Only an unbroken legion of trees. Sentinel straight, indifferent. The air acquired a subterranean chill. The light grew thin, aqueous as if strained through gauze. My phone, predictably, offered only dead air. Useless talisman. Onward, I reasoned. The trail must surely reassert itself. Yet the deeper I pressed, the more alien the woods became. Trees thickened, bark like scarred knuckles. The undergrowth weaving a tangled tapestry that clawed at my passage. Even the ambient forest murmurings, bird call, scuttling life, receded, leaving a vacuum. A profound stillness where my own steps, the snap of twigs, sounded like violations. Forward momentum felt forced now, instinct warring with logic. A nauseating sense of déjà vu clung to every turn. The landscape refused to progress, looping back on itself. Disorientation bloomed, a cold knot tightening low in my gut. And then, through a parting in the monolithic trees, it materialized. A structure, hunkered low, ancient, seemingly exhaled by the forest itself. A cabin, small and undeniably old, its spine bowed beneath a belt of moss, timbers weathered to the color of thunderclouds. Starkly windowless, its facade held only a single door, hanging open just a crack, nudged by a breeze I couldn't feel. An anomaly, utterly out of place, this deep, this lost. Yet, A strange magnetism emanated from it, a silent summons. Against all better judgment, my feet carried me closer. Approaching, the silence intensified, acquiring a physical weight. The door groaned under my touch, a sound that ripped through the stillness like tearing fabric. The interior gaped, vacant. Dust lay thick as velvet across the floorboards, the air stagnant, cloying with the perfume of rot and aged damp timber. Nothing. No table, no chair, no ghost of habitation. Just four walls and a low ceiling that seemed to press down suffocatingly close. A coldness, deeper than the ambient chill, traced its way up my spine. This wasn't mere emptiness, it was absence. A space recently vacated perhaps, or worse, a space occupied by something unseen, its gaze palpable on my skin. I retreated, stumbling back into the unnervingly silent woods, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. The air outside hadn't lightened. It felt viscous, heavy, leaching the very breath from my lungs. Escape. The imperative screamed through me. Turning, I plunged back the way I thought I'd come, pushing for speed. But the forest resisted. It seemed rearranged. Trees crowded closer, their shadowed forms merging, pathways dissolving into impenetrable thickets. The light dimmed further, plunging the woods into premature twilight. Panic surged, hot and metallic. Every shadow writhed, branches clawed like skeletal fingers. The ancient wood groaning overhead. It felt alive, this place, consciously reshaping itself to hold me fast. It started then, a susurrus insidious, threading through the oppressive quiet. Barely audible at first, like wind through distant pines, yet utterly distinct. I froze, breath hitched. Again, it coiled through the air, faint, sibilant, undeniably articulate. Not wind, not animal. A voice. My gaze darted wildly, searching the deepening gloom between the trunks. It was distant, the words indistinct, yet drawing nearer with unnerving speed. A tremor took hold of my hands. Louder it grew, coalescing from the silence, until the chilling syllables crystallized. Come back. Ice flooded my veins. No hesitation, only pure, primal flight. I bolted, crashing through the undergrowth, blind instinct overriding navigation. The forest became a maelstrom of green and brown streaks, branches lashing, roots conspiring to trip me. Behind, relentlessly, the whisper pursued, weaving through the trees, closer now, imbued with a terrible insistence. Come back. I risked no backward glance, fueled only by terror. Air tore through my lungs in ragged sobs, muscles screamed, but stopping was unthinkable. On and on, until, blessed relief, the oppressive density began to fracture. Light pierced the gloom ahead. The clearing, the trailhead, my vehicle, a mundane miracle. I burst from the tree line, staggering, lungs aflame, collapsing against the car door. Keys rattled in my trembling grasp. Ignition. Gravel spitting. I fled, the rearview mirror reflecting only the impassive wall of trees. Even miles down the road, the forest receding into memory, the echo remained, imprinted on my hearing, a phantom resonance clinging like burrs. Come back. What entity haunted those woods, what purpose the cabin served, remains a chilling enigma. But return? Never. Should your wanderings lead you to a half-hidden sign, a path dissolving into shadow, heed this warning. turn away. Something dwells in that deep silence, something ancient and patient, and it waits for you to come back. His existence first registered on a Tuesday, not with a thunderclap, but as a fleeting pressure behind glass, a face framed in a neighboring window as I walked the familiar path to my car. Yet, something in the sheer, unblinking intensity of that stare snagged my attention. A momentary snag in the fabric of the mundane. I dismissed it. An artifact of fatigue, perhaps, or imagination running wild. How could I have known that sliver of observation was the hairline fracture through which a nightmare would eventually pour, consuming everything? My name is Ilara. For 6 months, this enclave of tidy lawns and synchronized sprinkler systems had been my refuge. It's a place where curb appeal is doctrine, and whispers migrate on the afternoon breeze like invasive pollen. Mostly, I kept my own counsel, savoring the quiet hum after years submerged in the city's relentless roar. The man in the window, I learned through proximity, was my immediate neighbor. Glimpses before that Tuesday had sketched him vaguely. Middle-aged, hair receding from a perpetually furrowed brow, maybe early 50s. Our interactions were limited to the briefest, most perfunctory nods across the property line. His name remained unknown, but after that Tuesday, his presence began to imprint itself on my awareness. It started subtly, like a change in atmospheric pressure. Kneeling amongst my fledgling flower beds, I'd feel a prickle on the nape of my neck, a silent weight. A swift glance towards his house would catch only the twitch of a curtain falling back into place. Retrieving the mail became an exercise in peripheral tension, his sudden materialization on his porch coinciding perfectly with my own appearance, that fixed stare tracking my movements. I tried to weave narratives of loneliness, of simple curiosity about the newcomer, but the sensation of being perpetually observed intensified, coiling tighter with each passing day. One twilight evening, perhaps a week after that initial unsettling gaze, I was hauling the trash bins to the curb when his voice sliced through the quiet air. "Splendid evening, isn't it?" I recoiled, startled nearly off my feet. He stood just at the edge of his lawn, hands plunged deep into his pockets. A smile stretched across his face that failed utterly to ignite his eyes. "Oh, yes, it is," I managed, the words stumbling out, my composure fractured. "Silas," he offered, closing the small distance between us with a single step. "I believe we haven't been formally acquainted." A reciprocal smile felt like forcing stiff clay. The internal clang of warning bells was deafening. "Ilara, it's nice to meet you." Minutes unfurled in the thin currency of small talk, the predictable cadence of weather and neighborhood minutiae. Yet, an unnerving current ran beneath it. His gaze never wavered, even when mine drifted, seeming to catalogue every detail. The fabric of my shirt, the nervous way I tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, Excusing myself felt like escaping a low-grade magnetic field. Back inside, the deadbolt slid home with unusual force. A furtive peek through the blinds revealed Silas, still rooted in his yard, a silhouette contemplating my house in the deepening gloom. In the days that followed, Silas's orbit seemed to shrink, his presence becoming an inescapable constant. His activities acquired an uncanny synchronization with mine. My departure for work coincided with his retrieval of the morning paper. My return home aligned perfectly with his sudden need to meticulously water his azaleas. Always watching, always there. I began to vary my schedule, disrupting my own patterns, taking circuitous routes home, but somehow his awareness anticipated me. One dawn, departing a full hour earlier than usual, I found Silas already outside, hunched over the open hood of his car. "Engine trouble?" I asked, striving for an air of casual normalcy. He looked up, that same disquieting smile fixed in place. "Ah, no. Just a bit of preventative care. You're embarking early today, Ilara." The simple observation landed like a stone, chilling me. How could he possibly know this wasn't my customary time? As weeks bled into a month, Silas's intrusions grew bolder, stranger. I'd return home to find my patio chairs subtly rearranged, or find blooms I hadn't planted, garish marigolds, abruptly sprouting in my garden beds. Once, pulling into the driveway, a distinct flutter of movement behind my own living room curtain snagged my eye, but a frantic search inside revealed nothing disturbed. Paranoia began to sink its teeth in. Was my mind fraying? Was I misinterpreting the actions of an awkward, perhaps overly solicitous neighbor? Then came the night that shattered all doubt, crystallizing my fear into cold certainty. I surfaced from sleep near 3 a.m., roused by a sound downstairs. Initially dismissed as the house groaning settling into the cool night air, it repeated, a distinct, localized creak. The protest of that one loose floorboard in the hallway. Heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, I reached instinctively for my phone, finding the screen dark, lifeless. I distinctly remembered placing it on the charger. A wave of icy panic washed over me. Sliding silently from bed, I crept towards my bedroom door. The hallway stretched below, a corridor of shadows, but near the bottom stair, a denser darkness shifted, coalesced into a shape. Someone was inside my house. Retreating into the relative sanctuary of my room, my eyes darted wildly, seeking a weapon. My hand closed around the cool, heavy base of a bedside lamp. I yanked the cord from the wall with trembling fingers. Footsteps ascended the stairs now, slow, measured, deliberate. Each tread echoed the frantic pulse in my ears. I flattened myself behind the door, lamp held high. Every muscle quivering, coiled tight, the footsteps halted directly outside my room. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. I held my breath. Slowly, agonizingly, the doorknob began to turn. As the door swung inward, I brought the lamp down with every ounce of strength I possessed. A sickening thud echoed in the small space, followed by a choked grunt of pain. The intruder staggered back, and in the faint moonlight filtering through the window, I saw his face. Silas. "What in God's name are you doing in my house?" I shrieked, the lamp still brandished like a club. Silas clutched his head, crimson trickling through his fingers. But the expression contorting his features wasn't anger nor pain. It was something terrifyingly akin to manic exhilaration. "Oh, Elara," he breathed, his voice unnervingly placid despite the blow. "I've graced your home many times. I know all your secrets. The precise measure of cream for your morning coffee. The novel on your nightstand, page 94 if you were wondering. The scent of lavender lotion you smooth onto your skin before sleep. Nausea surged, hot and bitter. Every dismissed anomaly, every flicker of unease, every instance of misplaced certainty. It had all been real. He hadn't just watched. He had infiltrated, permeated every corner of my existence. "Get out," I whispered, the command barely audible through the tremor in my voice. "Get out now, or I swear I'll call the police." Silas's smile widened, predatory. "By all means, call them. Explain how your friendly neighbor Silas has merely been attentive. They'll dismiss you as overwrought." But even as he spoke, his gaze flickered past me, snagging on something. Following his line of sight, I saw it. The small lens of the security camera I'd positioned on my dresser days earlier. A desperate attempt to capture proof of something. He saw the comprehension dawn on my face. His smug certainty fractured. "You recorded this?" The question was a low growl, stripped of its earlier composure. I nodded, tightening my grip on the lamp's base. "Every single second. Now leave my house before I provide the police with a detailed demonstration of your friendliness." For a charged moment, violence hung heavy in the air. His hands clenched into fists. He took a menacing half-step forward. Then, abruptly, as if a switch had flipped, he spun and bolted down the stairs. The slam of the front door reverberated through the violated silence. Then nothing. Sleep was impossible. I spent the remaining hours huddled against the bedroom door, lamp clutched tight, starting at every creak and groan of the house settling around me. With the first pale light of dawn, I called the authorities. They arrived with brisk efficiency. I showed them the footage. Silas's house stood vacant next door. He had vanished into the night. But what the officers uncovered within its walls turned my blood to ice. An entire room consecrated to me. Walls papered with photographs. Hundreds upon hundreds, capturing me everywhere. Navigating grocery aisles, hunched over my work desk, moving through the private spaces of my own home. There were printouts of emails, transcripts of text messages, even a meticulously annotated calendar, charting the rhythms of my daily life. The police gathered it all, bagging the evidence of his obsession. They offered reassurances, promises of apprehension, declarations of my newfound safety. But standing amidst that chilling gallery of stolen moments, the shrine Silas had built to his fixation, I knew safety was a shore I might never reach again. I moved within the week, abandoning the house that felt irrevocably contaminated. My phone number changed. Email addresses were deleted. Even the color of my hair was altered. My new residence bristled with state-of-the-art security, and I began the arduous process of unpacking the trauma with a therapist. Yet even now, months adrift from that violation, the feeling lingers, a phantom limb of fear, a curtain twitching in a window across the street, a car idling too long at the corner. Each sends adrenaline searing through my veins. Locks are checked, rechecked, routines deliberately fractured. Because the chilling truth remains. Silas is out there. And the question haunts my sleepless nights. Am I still the sun his dark obsession orbits, or has he found another unsuspecting soul to ensnare in his terrifying constellation? The thought is a venomous whisper, prompting the twisted hope that his focus remains fixed on me. Because the alternative, imagining him beginning this slow, suffocating terror anew with someone else, is an abyss too dreadful to contemplate. So I remain vigilant, attuned to every shadow, every sound, because I learned, in the most brutal way possible, that sometimes the darkness isn't lurking in the unknown voids. Sometimes it resides right next door, basking in the daylight, wearing a neighbor's placid smile. And it watches. It always watches. Around 2 a.m, the rain began its assault, drumming hard against the window pane. I sat shrouded in the living room's darkness, curtains drawn, halfway against the night, the blue light of my phone, the only star in my small universe as I scrolled into oblivion. Silence reigned within. The television, a vacant eye, had offered nothing compelling hours ago. My apartment is a simple affair. This living room flowing into a brief corridor, the kitchen branching left, my bedroom waiting at the passage's end. The front door opens onto a cramped roof porch, watched over by a single naked bulb. I checked it earlier, that sentinel light, burning steady. Above the door, a modest security camera kept its vigil, aimed at the driveway and steps, programmed to alert my phone to any stirrings. Basic, but usually adequate. Tonight, though, the downpour was a different beast, a relentless cascade sheeting off the roof, splashing violently onto the concrete below. Through the thin veil of the curtains, the outside world was a realm of shifting suggestion. Headlights occasionally swept past, phantom beams sliding across my walls, painting fleeting Rorschachs of light and shadow. I paid them little mind, adrift on currents of thought. Then, a dissonance, a presence. Out on the porch, framed by the window, stood a shape. Vague, yet undeniably human, utterly immobile against the deluge. A wrongness prickled the air. No footfalls had announced its arrival, no creak from the porch planks. My front door, notoriously cheap, would have rattled its protest at the slightest weight. But only the rain's percussion had filled the silence. Still, the silhouette persisted, a dark totem behind the flimsy fabric. I froze, a statue mirroring the one outside, my gaze fixed. Not daring to rush the window, I watched from my seat, the pulse in my ears beginning to thrum a frantic rhythm. A tightness seized the back of my neck, slowly, Deliberately, I rose from the couch, striving for silence. Did they know I was here? Had the phone's faint glow betrayed me? Edging closer to the window, heart hammering, I observed the figure. Unmoving. Hooded it seemed, or perhaps just hunched against the storm. Head obscured. No features discernible. Just a tall, stark form, standing sentinel in the rain-lashed gloom. Sidestepping, I fumbled for my phone. The camera app remained silent, no motion alert. A fresh wave of disquiet washed over me. A person standing squarely on my porch, yet the electronic eye saw nothing? I launched the application, online. The last recorded event, mere rainfall, captured minutes ago. I tapped the live view. My screen displayed the familiar scene, the glistening porch, the rain-swept driveway, the wet pavement reflecting the distant street lamp's sickly glow. Empty, utterly devoid of the figure I could still perceive through the curtain. Vertigo threatened. Closing the app, I crept towards the door. Its tiny peephole, a potential window to truth or terror. A deep breath held tight. I pressed my eye to the cold glass, half expecting a face inches away. Nothing. The porch lay vacant, slick with wind-blown rain, a small pool gathering in one corner. The sentinel bulb cast its weak yellow circle. No one. Stepping back, I risked another glance at the curtain. The shape was gone. Yanking the fabric aside, confirmed it. Emptiness. Just as the camera and peephole had shown. Beyond, the street slept under its watery shroud. Sidewalks gleaming. No footprints visible from here, though the deluge would likely erase them swiftly. A tremor in my hands. Unlocking the deadbolt, I cracked the door open. A gust of damp air swirling inwards, chilling my bare feet on the threshold. Left, right, nothing but the ceaseless rain and the sleeping houses opposite, their windows, dark eyes. I checked around the porch corner. Sodden earth, plastered with decaying leaves. No impressions near the steps. Nothing amiss, save the encroaching puddle beneath the porch roof, fed now by a steady drip as the wind shifted. The cold air clung, my shirt sticking uncomfortably to my tense back. Retreating inside, I secured the lock, the click echoing too loudly. My phone felt heavy in my hand. Imagination, a trick of light and shadow, yet the image remained seared, solid, present. My heart refused to slow its frantic pace. I considered the camera history again. Back on the couch, I scrolled through the app's timeline. Motion events. Rain, 15 minutes prior. Rain, an hour before that, punctuated by passing headlights. Nothing resembling a human form. Settings checked. Sensitivity confirmed high. It should have triggered. It hadn't. Sleep felt impossible. The rain's drumming was no longer a lullaby, but an insistent, unnerving rhythm. That shape haunted the edge of my thoughts. Static, observing. Had I truly conjured it? It felt too real. Rising again, I parted the curtain, peering out. The porch light illuminated only wet wood and empty space. The street remained deserted. Pacing the confines of my living room, frustration warred with fear. Calling the authorities seemed absurd. There was a shape, officer, but it wasn't on camera. And it wasn't there when I looked properly. And there's no evidence. Pointless. Logic offered flimsy comfort. Perhaps someone, I had briefly stepped onto the porch, undetected by a momentary camera glitch. It had faltered before, missing deliveries, neighbors passing swiftly. But that didn't square with the visual discrepancy. Seeing the figure through the curtain, only for it to vanish the instant I checked the peephole. I examined the door itself. Handle, deadbolt secure, frame solid. Outside, the rain droned on. Listening intently yielded nothing beyond the storm. Side windows locked. Backyard gate latched. No rational reason to suspect intrusion, yet the unease clung like the damp air. Seeking distraction, I made coffee. The ritual, a small anchor in the swirling uncertainty. Standing in the kitchen, I sipped the scalding brew, my gaze repeatedly drawn to the living room archway, half expecting the silhouette to reappear. Only furniture and the street lamp's ambient glow met my eyes. Coffee mug in hand, I returned to the window, pulling the curtain fully aside now, staring out at the porch. The weak bulb struggled against the gloom, highlighting the growing puddle, its surface constantly disturbed by a drip from the eaves. For 10, perhaps 15 minutes, I watched the rain-streaked emptiness. Nothing moved. One last check of the camera. Tapping the app, the live feed presented the same vacant scene. Scrolling the motion clips yielded nothing new. Rain, headlights. Weariness began to dull the edge of my fear, replaced by an irritable exhaustion. Enough. I would try to sleep. Switching off the living room lamp felt like surrender, but I left the hallway light burning as I retreated to the bedroom, leaving the door ajar, a concession to lingering paranoia. The rain persisted, a monotonous soundtrack. Lying fully clothed atop the covers, I stared at the ceiling, the image of the figure stubbornly refusing to fade. Tall, broad-shouldered, head slightly canted. Watching me. Had it seen me move behind the curtain? 20 minutes passed in restless stillness before I conceded defeat. Back in the living room, light blazing defiantly now, I decided on one final, thorough inspection. Grabbing a forgotten umbrella from the closet, I unlocked the front door and stepped onto the slick porch. The scent of wet asphalt and sodden earth filled the air. Empty street, empty driveway where my car sat beaded with moisture. No tracks near it. The lawn was a dark, soggy expanse. Down the steps, into the rain's full embrace, the umbrella offering scant protection. My feet were already soaked. I circled the house, phone flashlight, cutting a weak beam across wet grass and scattered leaves. Nothing. No disturbed ground, no hidden watcher. The backyard fence stood solid, gate securely latched, listening again acutely. Only the drumming rain. Returning to the front porch, I paused, looking back at my own door from the outside. The camera perched above it, its tiny status light confirming it was active. Aiming my phone, I opened the app. There I was on the screen, a rain-spattered figure holding an umbrella. Proof. The camera was working perfectly now. Why then? Had it been blind before? Inside once more, door bolted. A fragile sense of security returned. Perhaps a prank, someone fleetingly present, leaving no trace. But the speed, the silence, the technological anomaly, it defied easy explanation. I resigned myself to waiting out the night. Huddled before the television's low murmur, I listened. The rain, relentless, finally began to soften towards 4 a.m. A last glance at the porch revealed nothing. Exhaustion finally claimed me. Leaving the living room light on, I went to bed. Sleep offered a fractured escape. When I surfaced, pale morning light filtered through the window. The rain had ceased. Silence, profound and welcome. My first instinct was the porch. Outside, the world smelled clean, washed new. The wood was merely wet. Neighbors emerged, cars starting. The rhythm of a normal day beginning. A nod exchanged with someone heading to work. No mention of nocturnal oddities, and I offered none. With paper towels, I mopped up the puddle. Later, checking the camera feed revealed the morning's mundane events. Me with the umbrella, me drying the porch, the neighbor passing. Scrolling back to the crucial hour around 2 a.m. showed only grainy footage of the downpour. No figure, no glitch, nothing. I searched for explanations. A warped reflection, a loose hanging basket, anything that might cast such a distinct shadow. Nothing fit. The camera's settings remained unchanged. A blind spot? Unlikely on such a small, exposed porch. I forced myself through the motions of the day. Breakfast, dressing, work, pushing the memory down. Yet, every glance towards the front door brought it back. The solid static shape in the rain, seen clearly through the curtain, absent from the peephole, invisible to the camera, seen only by me. That certainty remains, a cold, unanswered question lodged deep within. The shape that stood in the storm and vanished without a trace. Nothing like it has happened since. Not yet. The neon sign, 24-hour gas and snacks, pulsed a sickly rhythm against the vast Nevada dark, its glow barely staining the edges of the deserted asphalt sea. Behind the counter, near 2 a.m., Leo wondered if the promise was a lie tonight, if the silence would stretch unbroken until dawn. He couldn't know that the quiet was merely holding its breath, poised before a plunge into violence orchestrated by strangers carrying shadows in their eyes. Leo, 23 orbits around the sun, a scholar deferred, found himself marooned in this graveyard shift purgatory. It wasn't ambition realized, but it anchored him, paid for necessities, and carved out quiet hours for dog-eared novels and the nascent screenplay whispering in his mind. This particular descent into night began indistinguishably from others. At 10, he relieved Sal, the evening man. Their exchange was the usual liturgy of slow business, punctuated by Sal's weary advisory. The coffee machine, the station's sputtering caffeine heart, was acting temperamental again. Perfect, Leo mused, anticipating the struggle to stave off the shift's inevitable, leaden drowsiness. Hours bled into one another, measured in the restocking of coolers, the swish of a mop across linoleum, the futile coaxing of the defiant coffee percolator. Around 1, the rumble of a diesel rig brought a brief reprieve. A trucker, gravel-voiced and road-weary, needing fuel and caffeine for the long pilgrimage ahead. Leo offered a sympathetic nod, absorbing the fleeting warmth of human contact before the silence reclaimed its territory. Then, just past the 2 o'clock marker, the stillness fractured. Leo, lost in the Kerouac paperback that served as his usual companion, was jolted by the guttural growl of multiple engines arriving simultaneously. He looked up. 3 vehicles had materialized from the dark, a tired Chevy sedan, a battered utility van, and starkly incongruous, a polished black SUV that seemed to have strayed from a wealthier dimension. 6 figures emerged, all male, a disparate assembly spanning ages from mid-20s to perhaps 50. Some wore the hard miles of rough living etched onto their faces. Others possessed a veneer of respectability undone by the predatory intensity gleaming in their gazes. As they filed inside, the very air seemed to thicken, charged like the moment before a cloudburst. They didn't browse. They dispersed, moving through the aisles with a calculated purpose that sent tendrils of unease coiling in Leo's gut. The eldest, tall with hair like fractured salt and pepper, drifted toward the counter. His smile was a thin, brittle thing that never reached his eyes. "Bathroom key?" he inquired, the question innocuous, the tone anything but. Leo nodded, his hand moving mechanically toward the key dangling from its hook. Turning back, a cold dread washed over him as he registered their formation. One sentinel planted by the entrance, another positioned near the unblinking eye of the security camera. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird seeking escape. "Here you go," he managed, striving for a steadiness his voice barely achieved, extending the key. The man accepted it, but remained anchored to the spot. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "Listen close, kid. Here's the play. Pop the register. Give us every bill inside. Then you show us the safe. You do that, play it smooth. Maybe you get to see the sunrise." Leo's thoughts scattered like dropped coins. This wasn't real, not here. This forgotten outpost, where the peak drama was a declined credit card, couldn't be the stage for this. "Look," he began, the words stumbling out. "There's barely any cash. It's mostly plastic these days. Maybe you just..." A hand lashed out, gripping his shirt front, yanking him forward until their faces were inches apart. "This ain't a discussion," the leader snarled, breath hot and stale. "The register. Now." His fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, fumbled with the till keys. The lock finally yielded. As he began transferring the meager collection of bills into a waiting canvas bag tossed onto the counter by another man, his mind raced, seeking an escape route, a hidden lever. The silent alarm button pulsed, a useless prayer beneath his fingertips, impossibly distant under their unwavering scrutiny. "The safe," the leader commanded, impatience tightening his voice once the till was barren. "Where?" Heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, Leo led them towards the cramped back office. The safe, his one desperate hope, was governed by a time lock, impenetrable until the morning shift manager arrived. Would they buy it, or would disbelief curdle into violence? As he laid out the mechanical reality, he saw fury flicker across the leader's face. The man turned, conferring with his accomplices in low, urgent murmurs. Fragments drifted toward Leo. Waste of time. Move to the next. A fragile bubble of hope inflated in his chest. Perhaps they'd cut their losses, satisfied with the paltry cash grab. Then a phrase, cold and sharp, pierced the fragile membrane. Can't leave a witness. Time warped, stretching thin. He saw the leader's hand dip inside his jacket. For a weapon, undoubtedly. In that suspended moment, primal instinct surged, eclipsing thought. Leo lunged sideways, wrenching the fire extinguisher from its wall mount. He twisted the handle, unleashing a blinding white cloud that choked the small office. Disoriented shouts erupted. He swung the heavy cylinder blindly, felt it connect with yielding flesh, heard a strangled cry of pain. He didn't linger to assess the damage. He ran. Bursting from the office, pursued by curses and enraged yells, he navigated the familiar maze of shelves and displays. His months stalking this place now served a desperate purpose. He sent racks of chips and candy crashing down behind him, flimsy barricades against the coming storm. He reached the front door, only to find his exit blocked by one of the men. Without conscious thought, his hand closed around a plastic bottle of windshield washer fluid from a nearby pyramid display. He hurled it. It struck the man's head with a sickening, wet thud. The figure crumpled. The cool kiss of the night air hit him as he spilled into the parking lot. Footsteps pounded the asphalt behind him, closing the distance. He sprinted toward the absolute darkness beyond the fluorescent light's feeble reach, praying the desert night would swallow him whole. His lungs burned, scraped raw, the sound of the chase a relentless drumbeat driving him onward. Directionless, propelled only by the imperative to escape, he ran. After what seemed an eternity but was likely mere minutes, he risked a backward glance. No visible pursuers, but distant, angry shouts still echoed. He pressed on, stumbling over unseen rocks and skeletal brush. The gas station had shrunk to a faint, malevolent glow against the horizon. As the adrenaline tide began to recede, the stark reality crashed down. Alone, adrift in the immense, indifferent desert, hunted by dangerous men. Just as despair threatened to engulf him, twin points of light bloomed in the distance. Headlights approaching on the highway ribbon. A surge of desperate energy propelled him forward. He ran toward the light, waving his arms like a madman. The car slowed, hesitated, then stopped. An older couple peered out, their faces etched with a mixture of weariness and cautious concern. "Help!" Leo gasped, the word torn from his throat. "Please, men, after me, robbed the station, tried to kill me." Perhaps it was the raw terror vibrating in his voice, the wild disarray of his appearance, but they believed him. Doors unlocked, he scrambled inside, and the car accelerated away. The woman already fumbling with her cell phone, dialing 911 as the lonely highway devoured the miles behind them. The hours that followed dissolved into a haze of flashing lights, clipped questions, the sterile calm of a hospital checkup. By the time law enforcement descended on the gas station, the robbers were ghosts, leaving behind only scattered evidence corroborating Leo's frantic narrative. In the ensuing days, as the shock waves subsided, Leo grappled with the psychic residue of that night. The persistent echo of fear, the haunting gallery of what-ifs. the chilling intimacy with his own mortality. Yet, beneath the trauma, an unexpected current flowed, a fierce, quiet pride. He had stared into the abyss and refused to blink. He quit the gas station job, the decision needing no deliberation. The ordeal, however, had irrevocably altered his internal landscape. He returned to his studies, infused with a focus and resolve that surprised even himself. He still wrote, but now a deeper ink flowed from his pen. His narratives imbued with the weight of genuine peril and the surprising tensile strength he discovered within. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, phantom footsteps still chased him through dreamscapes, the metallic tang of fear flooding back. But then he would remember. He survived. He thought faster. He ran harder. He got away. And if he could face down armed men with nothing but wits and a fire extinguisher, perhaps finishing that degree, forging a life from the wreckage, wasn't such an impossible feat after all.